In the heart of California's deadliest wildfire season, veteran firefighter Jack Stone thought he'd seen it all. But when he charges into an inferno to save a trapped girl, he has no idea his next rescue will shake the foundations of European royalty. Through walls of flame and deadly smoke he finds her, a terrified child with eyes that hold secrets darker than the ash-filled sky. As she clings to his protective gear, neither of them knows that powerful forces are already closing in. Some want her safe, others want her silenced forever. What happens when a simple rescue mission becomes a deadly game of international intrigue? And how far will one firefighter go to protect a child who might hold the key to a throne? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wall of flame roared like a living thing, hungry and merciless. Jack Stone adjusted his oxygen mask and studied the burning tree line ahead, where the Paradise Valley fire had transformed California's pristine forest into an apocalyptic hellscape. The heat pressed against his protective gear like a physical force, testing every seam joint. "Command, this is Stone. I've got movement in Sector 7, possible civilian." His voice crackled over the radio, steady despite the inferno surrounding him. "Negative, Stone. Fire's too hot. Fall back to the line." Captain Rivera's voice carried the weight of authority earned over 20 years of service. Jack's helmet cam caught the flash of movement again, definitely human, small. "A child? Sorry, Cap, can't do that." He pressed forward, each step calculated against the unstable ground. "Someone's alive in there." The radio erupted with protests, but Jack was already moving. The smoke thickened, reducing visibility to mere feet. His training kicked in. Stay low, test each step, maintain orientation, the basics that had kept him alive through 15 years of service. Through the smoke, a structure emerged. What remained of a vacation cabin, its roof already consumed by flames. The movement he'd spotted came from a small window near the ground, probably a basement access. "Hello?" Jack's voice boomed through his mask. "Fire department, call out." A small face appeared at the window, then vanished. Jack's heart clenched. It couldn't have been more than 12. He reached the window just as a massive oak crashed nearby, sending a shower of embers across his back. The heat was becoming unbearable, even through his gear. The window was too small for him to enter, but just large enough for the child to escape. "I'm here to help." He cleared the debris from the window frame. "You need to come out now." The girl reappeared, pressing against the glass. Her eyes were wide with terror, but there was something else there too, a calculating intelligence that seemed out of place on such a young face. The window wouldn't budge. Jack smashed it with his Halligan tool, clearing the glass. "Come on!" "Take my hand!" She hesitated, glancing behind her as if weighing options. The building groaned ominously above them. "Now!" Jack reached in, and finally she moved. Her hands were small but surprisingly strong as she gripped his arms. He pulled her through the window just as the cabin's supporting beams gave way, collapsing inward with a thunderous roar. Jack cradled her against his chest and began the retreat. The fire had intensified, cutting off his entry route. The girl clung to him silently, her face buried in his turnout coat. Around his neck, something caught his eye. A flash of gold and gemstones, half hidden by the girl's collar. A pendant, far too valuable for a child to wear while camping. But there was no time to process that now. "Command, I've got one juvenile. Need an exit route," Static answered. The radio was dead. The smoke was impenetrable now, but Jack's internal compass remained true. He moved southwest, where the fire line should be holding. Each step was a battle against exhaustion and disorientation. The girl shifted in his arms, pointing urgently to their left. Jack hesitated. His training said to trust his heading, but something in her gesture seemed certain, desperate. A massive gust of wind parted the smoke momentarily, revealing a rocky outcropping to their left. It would provide better protection than their current route. Jack adjusted course. Seconds later, a burning tree crashed where they would have been. The girl had sensed it somehow, saved them both. They reached the outcropping just as Jack's oxygen tank beeped its final warning. Through gaps in the smoke, he could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. They'd made it to the perimeter. "There's our ride," he told the girl, but she had gone limp in his arms. As he emerged from the smoke wall, paramedics swarmed them. The girl was lifted from his arms, an oxygen mask placed over her face. In the chaos, the pendant around her neck caught the emergency lights, and Jack saw it clearly for the first time. A royal crest, partially melted but unmistakable. That's when the men in dark suits appeared, moving with urgent purpose toward the ambulance where the girl was being treated, and that's when Jack Stone's ordinary rescue became something else entirely. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos, but Jack noticed how the activity around the girl's bed was different. More guards than necessary, medical staff being turned away and replaced with specialists who arrived with their own equipment. Everything conducted with quiet urgency. He sat on an exam table nearby, allowing a nurse to check his vitals while keeping his eyes on the girl's room. The men in suits had multiplied. They spoke in hushed tones, their earpieces betraying them as more than hospital security. "Mr. Stone," a woman in a crisp pantsuit approached, badge already extended. "Detective Sarah Chen, SFPD Special Investigations. Mind if we talk?" Jack nodded, watching as she pulled the privacy curtain around them. Detective Chen was middle-aged, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing, and the careful movements of someone who'd seen too much to take anything at face value. "Quite. A rescue you made today," she said, consulting her tablet, "though I'm curious why you went in against direct orders." "I saw someone who needed help. That's my job." "And the girl? Did she say anything to you?" "She hasn't spoken at all." Jack paused, debating how much to share. "But there's something you should know." A commotion interrupted them. Through the gap in the curtain, Jack saw the girl fighting off a doctor trying to draw blood. Her first display of emotion since the rescue. "No!" Her accent was slight but distinct. "You are not authorized." Jack was moving before he realized it, Chen close behind. They reached the room just as two of the suited men stepped forward to restrain the girl. "Hey!" Jack's voice carried the authority of his profession. Everyone froze. "Back off! She's been through enough today." The girl's eyes locked with his, relief visible in them. One of the suited men turned, hand moving toward what Jack suspected was a concealed weapon. "This is a restricted area. This is my hospital," Chen cut in smoothly, badge raised. "And no one's restricting access to a potential witness in an ongoing investigation." The suited man's phone buzzed. He checked it, then stepped back with obvious reluctance. 2 minutes. Jack approached the bed slowly, keeping his movements calm and open. "Remember me? I'm Jack, the firefighter who got you out." She nodded, eyes darting between him and the others. "These doctors are trying to help," he continued. "But they need to check your blood. Make sure you didn't breathe in too much smoke. I cannot—" She stopped, choosing words carefully. "My blood type is complicated." Chen caught Jack's eye, eyebrows raised slightly. They both heard what wasn't being said. "How about this?" Jack offered. "I'll stay right here while they do it. 1 vial, basic tests only. Anyone tries anything else, we walk." The girl studied him with that unnervingly mature gaze. Finally, she extended her arm. A new doctor approached, female, older, radiating competence. The blood draw was quick and professional. As she worked, Jack noticed a fresh burn on the girl's wrist where the pendant had rested. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She opened her mouth, then closed it, conflict clear on her face. "Elena," she whispered finally. "Just Elena." One of the suited men shifted at the name, touching his earpiece. Jack felt the atmosphere in the room change instantly. "Okay, time's up." The first suited man stepped forward. "Miss, we need to move you to a secure facility." Elena's hand shot out, gripping Jack's sleeve. "Please," she whispered in that slight accent, "do not let them take me." Chen moved to the doorway, a casual motion that nonetheless blocked the exit. Unless you have court orders or proof of guardianship, she's not going anywhere. This is a matter of national security. Then, you'll have no problem producing the proper documentation. Chen's smile was professional but unyielding. Until then, she stays here under police protection. The suited men conferred quietly, then retreated to the hallway. Jack knew this was temporary. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than a simple rescue. Elena's grip on his sleeve loosened slightly, but she didn't let go. Her other hand went to her neck, finding the pendant missing. Looking for this? Jack carefully withdrew the melted necklace from his pocket. Had to remove it before it burned you worse. She took it, fingers tracing the damaged crest. You do not know what you have done by saving me, she said softly. But thank you. Chen was typing rapidly on her tablet. Jack, a word? He stepped away from the bed, noting how Elena's eyes tracked his movement. That crest, Chen said under her breath. I just found a match. You're not going to believe this. Chen turned her tablet so Jack could see the screen. On it was a news article from 3 days ago, featuring a photo of a familiar face in an unfamiliar setting. Elena, wearing a tiara and formal dress, standing beside an older couple on a palace balcony. The headline read, Princess Elena of Mauravania missing. Royal family fears kidnapping. You've got to be kidding me, Jack muttered, glancing back at the girl in the hospital bed. She was watching them intently, clearly aware of what they were discovering. Mauravania, Chen explained quietly, is a small but wealthy European kingdom. Very private, very traditional. And according to this, their only heir to the throne disappeared during a diplomatic visit to California. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. The suited men were returning, this time accompanied by a distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit. That's Baron Victor Kovac, Chen whispered, Mauravanian ambassador to the United States. The Baron swept into the room with practiced authority. Princess Elena, he said, bowing slightly. Thank God you're safe. We've been searching desperately. Elena's reaction was subtle but immediate. She pressed herself back against the bed, her hand finding Jack's sleeve again. Uncle Victor, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I'm surprised to see you here so quickly. Something in her tone made Jack's firefighter instincts flare. The same instincts that told him when a building was about to collapse. Your Royal Highness, the Baron continued, we must remove you to the embassy immediately. Your parents are frantic. Have you spoken with them directly? Elena asked. Strange that they haven't called me themselves. The Baron's smile flickered. Service here is unreliable. Now, if you'll come with us. She's not going anywhere, Jack said, stepping forward. Chen moved with him, presenting a united front. This is a diplomatic matter. One of the suited men snapped. You have no authority. Actually, Chen interrupted, as the ranking law enforcement officer present, I have several concerns. First, we have no direct confirmation from the Mauravanian government about the Baron's authority to remove Her Highness. Second, there's the matter of how the princess ended up in a burning cabin in the first place. Eleanor sat up straighter. Yes, Uncle Victor, perhaps you could explain that. And why the men who brought me there wore the same earpieces as your security team. The Baron's facade cracked for just a moment, showing something dark beneath. These accusations are absurd. I am the princess's uncle and royal ambassador. You are my father's cousin, Elena corrected, her young voice carrying surprising authority. And you are 17th in line to the throne, or you were before I was born. The pieces clicked in Jack's mind. The fire wasn't an accident. They never expected anyone to find her. Ridiculous, the Baron scoffed, but his hand twitched toward his jacket. Chen's weapon appeared so smoothly it seemed to materialize in her hand. Everyone stay very still. The suited men reached for their weapons, but Elena's voice cracked through the tension. Stop! As Crown Princess of Mauravania, I formally request political asylum in the United States of America. The words hung in the air like smoke. Even the Baron looked stunned. "I can prove my identity," Elena continued, "and I can prove that certain members of the royal court have been plotting against the crown. But I will only speak with American authorities." She paused, then added, "And I want him to stay." She pointed at Jack. "This is outrageous," the Baron began, but Chen cut him off. "Sir, you need to step outside now. My colleagues from the State Department are already on their way." She smiled professionally. "I'm sure they'll have lots of questions about diplomatic immunity and attempted murder charges." The Baron's expression hardened, but he allowed himself to be escorted out. His security team followed, their postures radiating, barely contained. Violence. When they were gone, Elena seemed to deflate, looking once again like the 12-year-old she was. "They'll try again," she said quietly. "Uncle Victor has been planning this for years. The fire was just his latest attempt." Jack pulled a chair next to her bed. "Tell us everything." "First," Chen interjected, already dialing her phone, "we move to a secure location. I'm calling in some favors. Jack, can you stay with her?" He looked at Elena, who was clutching her damaged pendant like a lifeline. He thought about the smoke and flames, about the perfect timing of the Baron's arrival, about how many accidents could befall a child in protective custody. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Elena smiled for the first time since he'd pulled her from the fire. Outside the room, they could hear the Baron arguing with hospital security, his cultured voice carrying threats just below the surface. The Sheriff's game was changing, and Jack knew his next shift at the fire station would have to wait. He'd walked into flames to save a girl. Now he'd have to walk into something far more dangerous to keep her safe. The hospital corridor erupted in chaos 20 minutes later. The overhead lights died, plunging everything into darkness before emergency power kicked in. Jack recognized the tactics. He'd seen enough emergencies to know this was no accident. "They're coming," Elena whispered, already moving from her bed. The fear was there in her voice, but underneath it ran steel. Chen drew her weapon again, checking the hallway. "Service elevators are best bet. Backup's 5 minutes out." "We don't have 5 minutes," Jack said, helping Elena into a hospital robe. He'd learned to read incoming disaster during 15 years of firefighting, and everything in him screamed that time was up. 3 shadows moved past their door, wrong angles, wrong pace to be hospital staff. Chen signaled them to stay low. Elena pressed something into Jack's hand, her damaged pendant. "The crystals," she whispered. "They're not decorative. They're data drives. Everything about Victor's conspiracy is stored inside." The door handle turned slowly. Chen moved first, using the door itself as a weapon. It caught the first man in the face as she crashed through, her shoulder driving him back. The second man reached for a weapon, but Jack was already moving. 15 years of rescue, training converting smoothly to combat. He drove his shoulder into the man's sternum, hearing the satisfying whoosh of air, leaving lungs. The third man raised what looked like a syringe, but Eleanor proved she wasn't helpless. She swung her IV pole with surprising strength, catching him in the knee. Chen finished him with a precise strike. "You've had training," Jack said to Elena as they ran. "Royal protocol," she replied, "though they never expected me to use it against them." They reached the service elevator just as shouts echoed from the stairwell. Chen pressed the call button repeatedly, but nothing happened. "They've disabled it," Elena said. "Victor's people will have control of all systems by now. Then we do this the firefighter way." Jack led them to the emergency stairs, his mind already mapping the route. "Down 2 floors, across to the east wing. There's a fire escape that'll put us in the ambulance bay." Chen nodded, taking rear guard. "Plenty of witnesses there. They won't risk anything too obvious." They started down, Elena moving with quiet precision despite her hospital gown. Jack caught glimpses of the princess beneath the frightened girl, someone trained from birth to handle crisis. 2 floors down, a door slammed above them. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell, moving fast. "Here," Jack pulled them through the exit into a maintenance corridor. The emergency lights cast everything in shadow, creating pools of darkness perfect for ambush. Elena suddenly stopped. "Wait! Listen!" In the distance, they could hear the distinctive sound of a helicopter approaching. "Victor," she said. "That's how they plan to take me. A medical transfer gone wrong, an unfortunate crash over the ocean." "Not happening," Jack growled. He led them past cleaning carts and supply closets, using the building's service architecture like he'd used the burning forest, reading signs others would miss. A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead, dressed in scrubs but moving wrong. Chen's warning shout merged with the sound of something cutting through air, a silenced weapon. Jack spun, shielding Elena with his body, expecting impact. Instead, he heard a grunt and the clatter of metal on floor tiles. Chen stood over the fallen attacker, her face grimly satisfied. "You okay?" she asked, retrieving the weapon. "Clear," Jack replied, "the language of emergency services feeling right even here." Elena touched his arm. "You were going to take that bullet for me." "Part of the job description." "No," she said softly. "It's not, but thank you." The helicopter sound grew louder, accompanied by new voices in the corridor behind them. "Time to go," Chen urged. They reached the fire escape, but Elena hesitated at the window. "They'll be watching for us to exit here." "Yes," Jack agreed. "They will," he smiled slightly, "but they're watching for 3 people trying to escape, not for what's actually going to happen." Understanding dawned in Chen's eyes. "You're insane. Gets mentioned in my performance reviews," he admitted. "Eleanor, how's your acting?" 5 minutes later, Victor's men watched as Detective Chen and a young patient fled from the fire escape, drawing their attention and pursuit. None of them noticed the maintenance worker calmly wheeling a cleaning cart through the ambulance bay, a second worker walking beside him. By the time they realized their mistake, Jack, Eleanor, and the real Detective Chen were already in an unmarked police car, headed for a safe house that officially didn't exist. In the back seat, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. "Where did you learn to do all this?" "You'd be surprised," Jack said, "how often firefighting and escape artistry overlap." Chen caught his eye in the rear-view mirror. "We bought some time, but they'll regroup quickly. We need a plan." "Actually," Eleanor said, her voice taking on that royal tone again, "I have one, but you're probably not going to like it." The safe house turned out to be a small apartment above a Chinese restaurant in the Sunset District. Chen's grandmother owned the building, which meant no digital trail and no questions asked. The smell of cooking garlic and ginger wafted up through the floorboards as Elena laid out her plan. "We need to access the Mauravanian consulate's secure server," she said, spreading out a paper napkin and sketching a rough floor plan. "Every diplomatic mission maintains redundant records. If we can get to a terminal, I can prove Victor's involvement." "The consulate," Jack exchanged looks with Chen. "That's not just breaking and entering, that's an international incident waiting to happen. It's also our best chance." Elena's fingers touched the damaged pendant around her neck. "The data drives are encrypted. The decryption keys are on the consulate's server. Without them, we have nothing but a suspicious necklace." Chen studied the rough map. "Security, 4 guards per shift. Electronic locks, cameras." Elena's knowledge was impressive and somewhat disturbing. "But I know the layout. I've been studying it since I first discovered Victor's plans 6 months ago." "6 months?" Jack sat beside her. "How long has this been going on?" Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. "My parents, they travel frequently. State visits, diplomatic functions. Victor started small, little accidents, close calls. A loose railing here, a suspicious food reaction there. But they survived, and he grew impatient." She took a shaky breath. "Then he realized it would be simpler to eliminate the heir. Once I'm gone, he's next in line." Jack felt that protective instinct surge again. He'd seen too many children marked by trauma in his line of work, but Eleanor carried her burden with a dignity that made his heart ache. "Why didn't you tell your parents?" he asked gently. I tried. But Victor's influence runs deep. My messages were intercepted, my evidence disappeared. When I finally got proof, she touched the pendant again. He moved quickly. The fire wasn't his first attempt this week. A flash of movement outside the window made them all freeze. Chen moved silently to check it. Just pigeons, but the tension remained. "We are not getting into the consulate," Chen said finally. "But I might have another way to access their system." She pulled out her phone, hesitating. "I know someone. Well, her methods aren't exactly official, but she's trustworthy." "No," Elena said sharply. "We can't risk bringing in anyone else. Victor has people everywhere. That's how he found us at the hospital so quickly. Someone on his payroll must have recognized me." As if to emphasize her point, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Chen checked her phone, her expression darkening. "APB just went out," she reported. "3 suspects wanted for kidnapping a foreign national. They're using diplomatic channels to pressure the department." "They're boxing us in," Jack realized. "Soon we won't be able to move without running into police or Victor's people." Elena stood, pacing the small room. In her borrowed clothes, jeans, and a sweatshirt from Chen's go bag, she looked like any other 12-year-old, but her bearing remained royal even now. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told you." She pulled a small key from inside the pendant. "This doesn't just unlock the data about Victor, it contains proof of something bigger, something that could change everything in Mauravania." Jack recognized the weight in her voice. "What kind of proof?" "My father, he's not well. He's been sick for months, though it's been kept secret. Victor's been using experimental treatments, claiming they're helping, but—" She broke off, composing herself. "I found evidence that the treatments are actually making him worse. Deliberately. He's poisoning the king," Chen said, "while pretending to cure him." Elena nodded. "Once I'm gone and my father is dead, Victor won't just be next in line. He'll be seen as the grieving relative who tried to save the king. The perfect story for a new ruler." Jack stood, driven by an urge to do something, anything. "Then we end this now, tonight." "How?" Chen asked. "We're outgunned, outmaneuvered. We use their playbook against them," Eleanor interrupted. Her eyes had that calculating look again. "Victor thinks he knows what I'll do. Run, hide, try to contact my mother. So we do something he'd never expect." She turned to Jack. "We walk straight through the front door of the consulate." "That's suicide," Chen protested. "No," Jack said slowly, seeing the plan take shape. "It's crazy enough to work. But we'll need help." Eleanor smiled, a fierce expression that transformed her whole face. "That's the best part. Help is already on the way. I just hope they get here before Victor realizes his men caught the wrong girl." At the hospital, outside, the sirens grew closer, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, a helicopter's searchlight began sweeping the streets of San Francisco. While Chen made calls to trusted contacts, Eleanor found Jack standing at the window, watching the city lights flicker on across San Francisco Bay. His expression was distant, lost in memories he usually kept buried. "Something's troubling you," Elena said. Not a question, but a gentle prompt. Jack smiled faintly. "That obvious? You have the same look my father gets when he visits the Palace Memorial Garden." She paused. "The one dedicated to my older brother. That—" got his attention. "I didn't know you had a brother." "He died before I was born. A fire in the summer palace." She watched Jack's face carefully. "Like I said, Victor has been playing this game for a long time." Jack's hands clenched on the windowsill. "I had a daughter once. Sophie. She would have been about your age now." Eleanor waited, sensing the weight of his words. "I was already a firefighter when she was born. Her mother, we were divorced, but we made it work. Sophie spent weekends with me." He took a shaky breath. "One weekend, I got called into work. Major warehouse fire. I left Sophie with my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Trusted her like family." "What happened?" Elena asked softly. "Gas leak in Mrs. Rodriguez's building. By the time we got the call, I was across town fighting a fire that turned out to be arson, a diversion." His voice turned bitter. "Someone wanted to steal from that warehouse so badly they set it on fire, and because of that I wasn't there when Sophie needed me." Elena touched his arm gently. "It wasn't your fault." "That's what everyone said, but when you're a father—" He shook his head. "You're supposed to protect them. That's the job, the only job that really matters." From the kitchen, they heard Chen's sharp intake of breath. Both turned to see her holding her phone, face grim. "Just got word from my contact in dispatch. She said, Victor's people found the decoy team. They're alive, but they're looking for us with everything they've got now." Jack straightened, pushing the memories back. "How long until they find this place?" "Not long. My grandmother's building isn't exactly a secret. Chen was already gathering their few supplies. We need to move." Elena retrieved the pendant and key. "Then it's time. The consulate will be changing guard shifts in 30 minutes. It's our best window." "One problem," Chen said. "They'll be watching all official vehicles. We'll never make it through the checkpoints they're setting up." Jack's expression shifted. "Maybe we don't need to." He pulled out his phone, showing them a news alert. "That warehouse fire I was fighting earlier? It's still burning. Half the city's resources are tied up there." Understanding dawned in Chen's eyes. "They'd let a fire truck through, and I know where we can get one." Jack's smile held no humor. "Think it's time I called in sick to work?" Elena watched the exchange, then spoke in her most regal voice. "You do realize this is technically stealing government property?" "Borrowing," Jack corrected. "And technically you're a visiting head of state. Consider it an emergency requisition." A siren wailed nearby, closer than the others. Chen moved to the back door, checking escape routes. "Jack," Elena said suddenly, "what you told me about Sophie, I'm sorry, not just for your loss, but because I know why you ran into that fire to save me, why you're risking everything now." He knelt to meet her eyes. "Elena, listen to me. Yes, what happened to Sophie is part of why I do this job, but protecting you now, that's not about the past. That's about who you are and what's right." She hugged him fiercely, surprising them both. For a moment she wasn't a princess or a fugitive, just a 12-year-old girl who needed someone to hold on to. "They're here," Chen called softly from the back door. 2 unmarked cars, standard tactical approach pattern. Jack stood, game face back on. "Okay, Your Highness, ready to steal a fire truck?" Elena straightened her shoulders, every inch royalty despite her borrowed clothes. "Lead the way, Mr. Stone." They slipped out the back door into gathering darkness, leaving behind the warmth and safety of their temporary haven. Ahead lay the consulate, Victor's trap, and maybe, if they were very lucky, a chance to save not just Elena's life, but her entire kingdom. The fire station's back entrance yielded easily to Chen's lock-picking skills. Inside, the bay was quiet, except for the distant radio chatter tracking the warehouse fire across town. Most units were already deployed, leaving their target, Truck 17, waiting in the shadows like a sleeping giant. 3 minutes, Chen whispered, checking her phone. "Night crew arrives for shift change soon." Jack moved with practiced efficiency, his muscle memory taking over as he began Truck 17's startup. Sequence. Elena watched from the jump seat, her face reflected in the truck's polished surface. "My father would love this," she said softly. "He always wanted to be a firefighter when he was young, before royal duty called." "What stopped him?" Jack asked, keeping his voice low as systems hummed to life. "The line of succession crisis. When his older brother abdicated, father had to assume the role of crown prince." She traced patterns on the window. "In Mauravania, royal blood isn't just about birth, it's about sacrifice. Every generation must give up something to prove they're worthy of the crown." Chen appeared at the cab's door. "Patrols are passing, we need to move." Jack gestured Elena into the truck's cab. As she climbed in, she continued, "Victor never understood that part. He thinks royal blood is about power, about taking. But it's really about what you're willing to give up for your people." The truck's engine turned over with a deep rumble. Jack eased it forward, lights off, using the minimal illumination from the bay's emergency signs. "That's why he'll never be a true king," Elena said firmly. "He's incapable of sacrifice." They emerged onto the street just as a police cruiser turned the corner. Jack held his breath, but the officer merely waved as they passed. Their borrowed turnout gear and the truck's familiar profile provided perfect cover. "We've got 12 minutes to reach the consulate," Chen calculated. "After that, shift change ends and questions start." Jack nodded, then noticed Elena's expression in the rearview mirror. "What aren't you telling us?" She met his eyes in the reflection. "There's something else in the data drives, something even Victor doesn't know about." She took a deep breath. "My father, he knew he was being poisoned. He's been gathering evidence, building a case, but he couldn't trust anyone inside the palace." "So he trusted you," Jack said, understanding dawning. "I'm 12. Elena said with a hint of pride. "No one suspected I was carrying state secrets. Father encoded everything into my pendant, knowing I'd understand when the time came." Her voice caught. "His last clear day, he made me memorize the server passwords, said I was the only one he could trust with Mauravania's future." A call crackled over the truck's radio, another fire crew requesting backup at the warehouse. Jack keyed the mic, responding with a brief status report that would buy them time. "That's why Victor's so desperate," Chen realized. "If your father dies while you're alive and have proof of the poisoning, Victor won't just lose the throne," Elena finished. "He'll face charges of treason. In Mauravania, that still carries the death penalty." They turned onto the embassy district's broad streets. Ahead, the Mauravanian consulate rose like a small fortress, its gates gleaming under security lights. "One problem," Jack said. "Even with the truck, they're not going to just let us drive in." Elena's smile turned calculating. "Yes, they will, because there's one more thing about royal blood you need to know." She reached into her pocket and removed a small tin. "Sometimes, sacrifice is literal." Before they could stop her, she slashed her palm with a piece of broken glass from the tin. Blood welled up instantly. "Elena!" Jack reached for her, but she was already moving, smearing her blood across the inside of the truck's windshield. "Royal blood contains markers," she explained, calmly, wrapping her hand with a bandage from the first aid kit. "The consulate's sensors will detect them. Standard protocol requires them to grant immediate access to any member of the royal family, no questions asked. It's hardwired into their security system. Even Victor can't override it." Jack and Chen stared at her. In the growing darkness, the young princess looked suddenly dangerous, a child capable of drawing blood for her cause. "You're sure about this?" Jack asked softly. Elena's eyes were steady. "I told you. Royal blood is about sacrifice. Now let's go steal those files and save my father." The consulate gates loomed ahead, and Jack could already see guards moving to intercept them. But Elena's blood was working its ancient magic. Sensor lights were changing from red to green, and the massive gates were beginning to swing open. They were about to step into the dragon's lair, armed with nothing but a fire truck, a detective's badge, and the iron will of a 12-year-old princess who'd learned her lessons about power and sacrifice all too well. The consulate gates closed behind Truck 17 with an ominous clang. Guards approached from both sides, hands on weapons, but their postures changed when the sensors confirmed Elena's blood signature. Jack watched their eyes go wide with recognition. "Your Highness," the lead guard said in accented English, bowing slightly, "we had no notification of your arrival." "That was intentional," Elena replied, her voice carrying the perfect mix of authority and tired patience. "After the attempt on my life, we needed to move quietly. These officers are my protective detail." Jack and Chen stood at perfect parade, dressed in their borrowed turnout gear, looking every inch the professional security team. The guard studied them, then nodded slowly. "Of course, but protocol requires I inform Ambassador Kovac. My uncle is precisely who you will not inform," Elena cut in. "Not if you value your position. or your life." The guard paled. In that moment, Jack saw what Elena had gambled on. The staff's ingrained loyalty to royal blood trumping any allegiance to Victor. They were escorted inside, Elena maintaining her, regal-bearing despite her borrowed clothes. Jack catalogued exit routes, weapons, camera positions, anything that might save their lives when this inevitably went wrong. The consulate's interior was a mix of modern security and old-world grandeur. Marble floors, priceless artworks, and hidden cameras everywhere. Elena led them with confidence through the corridors, as if she'd walked them 1,000 times. "Security office is 2 floors up," she whispered. "We need Princess Elena." They turned to see a middle-aged woman in an elegant suit hurrying toward them. Elena's face showed genuine warmth. "Mrs. Kovac," she said, "I had hoped to find you here." Jack tensed, but Elena's slight hand gesture kept him still. This was the ambassador's wife, and based on Elena's reaction, an unexpected ally. "Thank God. You're safe," Mrs. Kovac said, embracing Elena. "When Victor said you'd been kidnapped—" She pulled back, studying Elena's face. "But you weren't kidnapped at all, were you?" "No," Elena confirmed, "and I think you know why I had to run." Mrs. Kovac's expression hardened. "The treatments. I've watched them poison your father, watched Victor manipulate everything. But I had no proof." "I do," Elena said, "but I need to access the secure server. Victor changed all the codes after you disappeared. Not all of them." Elena's hand went to her pendant. "Some things even he can't override." Footsteps echoed down. The marble hall, multiple sets, moving fast. Mrs. Kovac reacted instantly, pushing them toward a hidden door behind a tapestry. "Service stairs," she said. "I'll delay them." They slipped through just as voices approached. Through the door they heard Mrs. Kovac greeting the new arrivals, her tone perfectly casual. The service stairs were narrow and dark, lit only by emergency lights. They climbed quickly, Eleanor leading the way with surprising speed. "Mrs. Kovac?" Chen said quietly. "Can we trust her?" "She's known about Victor's plans for months," Elena replied, "been gathering her own evidence. But he watches her too closely for her to act." They reached the security level. Eleanor pressed her bleeding palm to the biometric scanner. The door clicked open. The security office was empty, shift change timing working in their favor. Eleanor moved straight to a terminal, fingers flying over the keyboard. "How long?" Jack asked, watching the door. 3 minutes to decrypt, 2 to download. Elena inserted her pendant into a port. Then alarms blared, red lights strobed across the marble floors. "Victor," Elena said grimly, not stopping her work. "He's here, earlier than expected." Jack and Chen took up positions at the door. Below they could hear shouting, running feet. "Download starting," Eleanor reported. 2 minutes. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged. Armed men poured out, led by Victor himself. His cultured facade was gone, replaced by cold fury. "Close the fire doors," Chen said suddenly. "Like we would for a fire." Jack smashed the emergency alarm. Steel doors slammed down throughout the floor, designed to contain flames. They bought perhaps another minute. "Done!" Elena yanked the pendant free. "But they're between us and the stairs." Jack smiled grimly. "Good thing we came prepared." He pulled the fire truck's master key from his pocket. Time for a little professional chaos. He triggered the building's fire suppression system. Sprinklers erupted throughout the floor. Alarm bells screamed. Through the chaos, they could hear Victor shouting orders. "The truck," Chen realized. "If they search it—" "They won't," Elena said confidently, "because it's about to be very busy." She pulled a small emergency flare from her pocket, standard fire truck equipment. Jack understood immediately. "South wing," he said. "Record storage, lots of paper, no people this time of night." Eleanor struck the flare. A dedicated firefighter would have to respond to that, wouldn't they? Through the steel doors they heard Victor's men trying to override the fire systems, but Jack knew they had just enough time. Sometimes, he thought, watching Elena's fierce smile in the flare's red glare, the best way to fight fire was with fire. The flare arced through the air, sailing over filing cabinets to land among stacks of diplomatic papers. Flames caught instantly, triggering a cascade of alarms. Through the chaos, Eleanor led them down a hidden service corridor, one absent from the building's official plans. "Mauravanian consulates always have escape routes," she explained as they ran, "built during the Cold War. Victor doesn't know about this one because it's reserved for royal family." The passage was narrow, lit by ancient emergency lights, decades old. Maps lined the walls, showing a network of safe houses across America. "Your family planned for everything," Chen observed, studying a map as they passed. "We've survived for 9 centuries," Elena replied. Not by accident. She stopped at an intersection, consulting markings only she could read. "After World War II, my grandmother established backup sites in every major city, places where loyal citizens would hide the royal family if needed." Jack heard boots stomping overhead, Victor's men searching floor by floor. The fire would keep them busy, but not forever. "Here." Elena pressed a hidden panel, revealing a small room filled with emergency supplies. Maps, money, clothes, everything needed for a royal on the run. She quickly changed into clothes that fit her better than Chen's borrowed ones. "How many people know about these?" Jack asked, keeping watch. "Only the monarch and heir are told." Elena's voice turned bitter. "Victor's spent years trying to find them. It's why he was so angry when father named me heir instead of him. Not just the throne. He lost access to centuries of royal secrets." She retrieved a laptop from a hidden safe, booting it up with practiced speed. The pendant's data transferred quickly as she explained. "Mauravania's wealth doesn't come from oil or tourism. We're Europe's digital vault. Every major power stores sensitive data in our secure servers. The royal family are the ultimate administrators." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "Victor doesn't just want the throne. He wants the access codes to half of Europe's secrets." Footsteps echoed down a nearby corridor. Chen readied her weapon while Jack barricaded the door. "Father knew Victor was coming for him," Elena continued, eyes locked on the screen. "So he divided the master keys, half in the pendant, half in Mauravania's most secure server, the one under the royal palace. We need both to prove Victor's crimes, and to access the blackmail material he'd use as king," Chen added, understanding. "Exactly. But Elena's voice caught. "The palace server can only be accessed by someone with royal blood. If father dies before we get there, Victor becomes king and gains access," Jack finished. "How long does your father have?" "Based on his last health report. 3 days, maybe 4. She closed the laptop. "The poison Victor's been giving him, it's designed to look like natural organ failure. Once he dies, Victor will destroy all evidence." The laptop disappeared into a hidden compartment as Eleanor retrieved something else, a small wooden box with the royal crest. "What's that?" Jack asked. "Insurance." She opened it to reveal a vial of dark liquid. "My blood, taken monthly. Since birth, pure royal blood, untainted by Victor's drugs, proof that any changes in the king's blood aren't natural." An explosion rocked the building above, the fire reaching something volatile in the records room. Their diversion was working almost too well. "We need to move," Chen urged. "If the building's compromised, they'll seal all exits." Elena nodded, but her hand trembled slightly as she stored the vial. Jack knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly, "you're not alone in this anymore." She met his eyes. "The things I'm asking you to risk, it's not fair. Neither is what Victor's doing to your family." Jack squeezed her shoulder. "Sometimes the right thing isn't the fair thing." Another explosion rattled the walls. Elena straightened, royal bearing returning. "The tunnel ends at an old maintenance. Garage 3 blocks away," she said. "We'll need transportation." "Already handled," Chen replied, checking her phone. "I called in a favor. Transport will be waiting." They moved quickly through the tunnel, guided by Elena's knowledge and Jack's. Firefighters' instinct for navigation. Behind them, sirens wailed as real fire crews responded to the blaze they'd started. "Victor will have people watching the airport," Chen said as they ran. "We're not going to the airport." Elena's voice was steel. "We're going to Mauravania. It's time to end this where it began." The tunnel air grew fresher as they approached the exit. Somewhere above, Victor raged in his burning consulate, while ahead lay a desperate race across an ocean to save a king, a country, and a 12-year-old girl's birthright. Jack checked his watch. 67 hours until the poison completed its work. The game was no longer about escape. It was about justice, and this time he wouldn't fail to protect someone who needed him. Chen's favor turned out to be a sleek black SUV with diplomatic plates, driven by a woman whose bearing screamed, "Federal Agent Sarah Chen." The woman nodded as they approached. "You've caused quite a stir. State Department's having fits." "Kate," Chen replied. "Thanks for coming. Consider us even." Kate's eyes found Elena. "Your Highness, officially I'm not here. Unofficially, there's a C-17 waiting at Travis Air Force Base. Military transport off the books." Elena studied the agent. "You're CIA. Hardly anyone's CIA anymore, Your Highness." Kate smiled thinly. "Let's just say certain agencies have a vested interest in Mauravanian data security remaining independent." They piled into the SUV just as emergency vehicles screamed past, heading for the burning consulate. Jack caught Eleanor watching the flames with a mix of guilt and satisfaction. "Victor will report the fire as a terrorist attack," she said. "He'll try to use it to discredit me." "Let him," Chen replied. "Every report, every camera footage, every dispatch call creates a paper trail, one that proves you were the victim, not the aggressor." Kate navigated through side streets, avoiding main roads where Victor's people would be watching. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before..." Static burst from the radio. "All units, be advised. Federal warrant issued for 3 suspects in connection with consulate attack, considered armed and dangerous." "Make that 10 minutes," Kate corrected, accelerating. Elena clutched her pendant. "The data we stole, it's not just about Victor's. Crimes, the servers under the palace, they hold everything, state secrets, financial records, blackmail material. If Victor gains control, he could destabilize half of Europe," Kate finished. "We know. Why do you think you're getting a military transport?" A police cruiser flashed past in the opposite direction. Jack tensed, but it didn't turn around. "Travis is an hour out," Chen said. "Victor will have people watching the roads." "Not all the roads." Kate turned onto a darkened street, killing their lights. "Sometimes the best way to hide is to go where they'd never expect." They pulled into what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Inside, a helicopter waited, rotors already. "Spinning! Coast Guard," Kate explained. "You'll bypass all ground checkpoints. The C-17 crew has diplomatic clearance for a direct flight to Europe." "Victor will track the flight," Elena protested. "No," Kate smiled. "He'll track a different C-17 heading to Germany. Amazing how many military transports fly on any given night." Jack helped Elena into the helicopter while Chen and Kate conferred quietly. He caught fragments. NSA involvement, royal encryption protocols, potential compromise. Elena gripped his arm suddenly. "Jack, if something happens, if we don't. Make it in time, we will, but if we don't." She pressed a piece of paper into his hand. "These are account numbers, enough money to disappear anywhere. Promise me you'll use them. Victor won't stop hunting everyone who helped me." Jack pocketed the paper without looking at it. "Nothing's going to happen to you. You can't promise that. Watch me." Chen joined them in the helicopter. Kate remained outside but caught Elena's eye. "Your Highness," she called over the rotor noise. "Remember, the crown isn't just about birthright. It's about who's willing to risk everything to protect their people." Elena's spine straightened. "Like my father did. Like you're doing now." The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply over sand. "Francisco Bay." Below, emergency lights still pulsed around the consulate. Somewhere down there, Victor was discovering just how much his niece had outmaneuvered him. 65 hours, Elena murmured, checking her phone. Will it be enough? Jack watched the city lights fade behind them. It has to be. But as they flew toward Travis and their waiting transport, he couldn't shake the feeling that Victor had more moves to make. The game was far from over, and they were flying straight toward the heart of his power. Chen caught his expression. Having second thoughts? No. Jack looked at Elena, this remarkable child who carried the weight of a kingdom. Just wondering what other secrets Mauravania has in store for us. Elena's smile was grim. Trust me, Mr. Stone, you haven't seen anything yet. The helicopter banked east, carrying them toward destiny, danger, and a race against time that would test every bond they'd forged in fire. The C-17 touched down at a remote airstrip in Austria, just miles from the Mauravanian border. Dawn painted the surrounding Alps in shades of gold and rose, but there was no time to admire the view. A sleek, black Mercedes waited on the tarmac, its driver standing at rigid attention. "Carl," Elena breathed, genuine relief in her voice. "You got my message." The driver bowed deeply. "Your Highness, it is good to see you safe." His accent was thick, but his English precise. "Though I wish the circumstances were better." "Status report," Elena commanded, sliding into the car's armored interior. The others followed, Jack noting the vehicle's military-grade reinforcement. "Your father lives," Carl reported as they drove, "but he's been moved to the secure medical wing. Victor's men control all access. They're saying it's for his protection after your kidnapping." Elena's fingers whitened around her pendant. "And my mother? Under house arrest. Officially, she's resting after your disappearance." Carl's eyes met Elena's in the rearview mirror. "The Royal Guard is divided. Some suspect Victor's plot but lack proof. Others believe his lies." "How long to the palace?" Chen asked, checking her weapon. 3 hours by normal routes." "But we're not taking normal routes." Carl turned onto a narrow mountain road. "The old smugglers' paths are still maintained. Royal contingency protocol." Elena nodded. "Victor won't expect us to come this way. These roads aren't in any official records." "What about unofficial ones?" Jack asked. "The only map is here." Elena tapped her temple. "Every air memorizes them. It's part of our training." The Mercedes climbed higher into the mountains, Carl handling the treacherous turns with practiced skill. Elena pulled out her laptop, connecting it to a secure satellite. "Link. The palace network is isolated," she explained, fingers flying over keys. "But the medical wing has to maintain outside connections for emergency consultations. If I can access their diagnostic systems..." The laptop chimed. Data scrolled across the screen. Medical charts, test results, medication logs. "There," Chen pointed. "The changes in your father's blood work started 8 months ago." Elena's face hardened. "When Victor became his personal physician." "Look at the progression. Subtle at first, then accelerating. He's getting impatient." 58 hours left, Jack noted grimly. The car crested a ridge, and suddenly they could see it. Mauravania spreading below them like something from a fairy. Tyler, ancient forests, pristine lakes, and at the heart of it all, the capital city of Cronenberg with its magnificent palace. "The palace sits on foundations older than most countries," Elena said softly. "The secure servers are housed in bunkers dating back to World War II. Victor thinks he knows all its secrets, but the truth is, no one person ever has. That's how we've survived so long." Carl turned onto what looked like a game trail, but was actually a carefully maintained emergency route. "Your Highness, there's something else. Victor has called an emergency session of Parliament for tomorrow morning to declare me incompetent," Eleanor nodded. "Remove me from the succession." "He'll claim you're traumatized," Chen reasoned. "Use the fire and your flight as evidence." "It won't matter," Eleanor said firmly. "Once we reach the palace servers..." A shot cracked through the morning air. Carl swerved as the rear window spiderwebbed, but didn't shatter. "Contact!" Chen shouted, spotting motorcycles emerging from the trees behind them. Victor's men! Impossible, Carl growled, accelerating. These routes are secret. Unless someone talked, Elena finished. Her voice was cold. Someone high in the Royal Guard, someone who knew where to wait for us. More shots peppered the car. The armored plates held, but they couldn't take sustained. Fire forever. There! Jack pointed to a narrow side trail. That ridge loops back around, right? Elena's eyes widened. Yes, Carl, take it. The Mercedes shot down the trail, branches scraping its sides. The motorcycles followed, their lighter frames handling the rough terrain better than the car. Elena, Jack said quietly, the thing about fire is, it's not just destructive. Sometimes it's a tool. She caught his meaning immediately. Carl, the emergency kit. Under the seat, Your Highness. Elena retrieved a metal case marked with Moravanian military stamps. Inside were road flares, powerful. One's designed for mountain rescue. The woods are dry from summer, she said, understanding Jack's plan. And that slope behind us is steep. Chen readied her weapon. I'll give you cover. Jack took the flares, rolling down his window. Bullets whined past as Chen returned fire, forcing the pursuers to weave. The first flare ignited with a bright magnesium flare, its heat intense even through Jack's firefighter's instincts. Now, Elena commanded. Jack launched the flares in a precise pattern, creating a curtain of fire that raced up the dry slope. The motorcyclists broke pursuit, forced to retreat as the flames spread with tactical precision. Like you said, Elena smiled grimly. Sometimes we fight fire with fire. They roared through mountain passes as dawn broke fully over Moravania. Behind them, smoke rose from the mountainside, a signal fire announcing the return of a princess who'd learned to turn her enemies' weapons against them. Ahead lay the palace, Victor's treachery, and a race against time to save not just a king, but the soul of a kingdom whose roots ran deeper than anyone suspected. The palace's service entrance hadn't changed in 3 centuries, a testament to Moravanian architectural precision. Carl parked the bullet-riddled Mercedes in a hidden garage, and Elena led them through passages that smelled of age and secrets. The guards change at sunrise, she whispered. Victor will be in the medical wing with Father. It's his pattern. He personally administers the treatments each morning. Giving himself an alibi, Chen noted. If the king dies under his care, he can claim he did everything possible. They moved silently through the ancient corridors, Elena navigating by memory, while Carl watched their rear. The palace felt like a living thing, its stone walls holding centuries of whispered conspiracies. Security hub is 1 level down, Elena said. We need access to verify the medical wing footage before confronting Victor. Getting that footage won't be easy, Carl warned. Victor's men control the hub. Jack studied the palace's emergency plans mounted on the wall. Maybe we don't need to fight our way in. Every secure facility has the same weakness. You can't lock down emergency systems. Elena caught on immediately. The fire protocols, just like the consulate. Exactly. Trigger an alarm in the right place, and emergency procedures override security lockdowns. Chen smiled. Victor's men will have to evacuate. They found a maintenance room near the security hub. Jack examined. The fire suppression system with professional expertise. 1 small fire in a controlled space, he said. Should create enough smoke to trigger the sensors without causing real damage. Elena produced another emergency flare. Like Father always said, sometimes the old ways are best. The flare ignited, and within minutes, alarms blared through the EA palace. Guards rushed past their hiding spot, following evacuation protocols that were older than they were. Now, Chen said, we have maybe 5 minutes. They slipped into the security hub. Elena went straight to the main terminal, her royal access codes cutting through encryptions like a blade through silk. There, she said, fingers flying, Victor's visits to the medical wing. All the footage archives straight to the secure servers. The screen showed Victor entering the king's room each morning, medical bag in hand. But something caught Jack's eye. Wait, go back 2 days. Eleanor reversed the footage. They watched as Victor prepared an injection, but this time the camera angle showed something else. He was wearing a ring, an unusual black stone that seemed to absorb light. That ring, Carl breathed. I've seen it before, in the Royal Archives. It belonged to the last person who tried to seize the throne 2 centuries ago, a reminder of failed coups, Eleanor said grimly. Victor's wearing it as a promise to succeed where others failed. She downloaded the footage to a secure drive. But he made a mistake. That ring is proof he's been studying the old records, planning this for years. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. The guards returning. They slipped out through a hidden panel just as the security team burst in. 53 hours, Jack counted down. Where's the medical wing? 3 floors up, North Tower. But we can't. Just walk in. An explosion rocked the palace, making the ancient stones shudder. Emergency alarms changed tone. That wasn't us, Chen said. Carl's radio crackled. Multiple explosions at the perimeter, armed men breaching the gates. Elena's face went pale. Victor's getting desperate. He's staging a coup now, using our return as justification. Through the windows, they could see smoke rising from several points around the palace. Guards ran in formation, trying to contain multiple threats. He's creating chaos, Chen realized. Cover to eliminate the king while everyone's distracted. We need to split up, Elena said. Carl, rally the loyal guards. Chen, get to the Parliament building. There's a direct line to the capital's emergency broadcast system. When I give the signal, play the footage of Victor. Let everyone see what he really is. They nodded, but Jack caught her arm. What about you? I'm going to the medical wing. Her voice was steel. Victor won't expect me to come alone. You won't be alone, Jack said firmly. Where you go, I go. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but another explosion cut her off. Through the smoke and chaos, they could hear Victor's voice calling for order, for loyalty, for protection of the crown against terrorist insurgents. Together then, she said. But Jack, what we're about to do, there's no going back. He thought of Sophie, of chances lost and promises kept. Sometimes going back isn't an option. Sometimes you just have to walk through the fire and trust you'll make it to the other side. Eleanor squared her shoulders, every inch the heir to an ancient throne. Then let's go save my father and make Victor learn what royal justice really means. They moved through the chaos-filled palace, smoke and alarms masking their approach. Ahead lay the medical wing, Victor's ambitions, and a confrontation. 9 centuries of royal history had been building toward. The medical wing's security doors yielded to Elena's royal access codes. Inside, monitors beeped steadily, marking the rhythm of a king's fading heartbeat. Through the observation window, they could see Victor bent over his patient, preparing another treatment. Check the time, Victor was saying to a nervous attendant. We must be precise with His Majesty's medication. Eleanor's hand found Jack's, squeezing once. Then she stepped into the doorway, her voice cutting through the medical machinery's hum. Hello, Uncle. I believe you're in my father's chair. Victor spun, the syringe in his hand glinting dangerously. For a moment, raw shock crossed his features before his diplomatic mask slipped back into place. Elena, thank God you're safe. When we heard about the terrorist attack, you mean the fire you set? Elena moved into the room, Jack close behind. Her. Or perhaps you're referring to the explosions your men just set off around the palace. Victor's eyes narrowed, calculating new odds. You're confused, my dear. The trauma you've experienced, the only trauma here, Eleanor said coldly, is watching you slowly poison my father. The attendant backed away, but Victor's hand shot out, grabbing the man's arm. Stay exactly where you are. The princess is clearly unwell. The kidnapping has affected her mind. Has it? Elena held up her pendant. Because the data drives in. Here, suggest otherwise. 8 months of security footage. Blood tests, financial transfers to certain pharmaceutical companies specializing in untraceable toxins. Victor's mask cracked slightly. Behind him, monitors showed the king's steady pulse, each beat marking time they couldn't waste. Even if that were true, Victor said carefully, accidents happen. Files can be corrupted, and loyal servants can meet unfortunate ends before testifying. The threat hung in the air, but Elena smiled, a sharp expression that transformed her young face into something ancient and dangerous. That's why I'm not depending on files alone. She reached into her pocket and produced the vial of her stored blood. Pure, royal blood, taken before your poisoning began. The perfect control sample to prove what you've done to father's blood. Chemistry. Victor's diplomatic facade vanished entirely. Give me the vial and the pendant, now! Or what? Elena's voice carried the weight of centuries. You'll kill me like you killed my brother? Stage another accident? Your brother was weak, Victor snarled. Like your father, they never understood what real power means. Actually, Jack said quietly, I think you're the one who doesn't understand power. Victor finally seemed to notice him, really notice him. The firefighter. Of course, another fool playing at heroics. No, Elena said. He's someone who understands what you never have. Real power isn't about taking, it's about protecting. Outside, explosions continued to rock the palace. Victor's coup was in full swing, but here in this room, everything distilled down to 4 people and 9 centuries of royal destiny. I've spent years planning this, Victor said, his cultured accent slipping in his rage. Everything is in place. The Parliament will confirm me as regent within hours. The Royal Guard is divided. The security services are compromised. And yet you still failed, Elena said softly, because you never understood the most important secret of Moravanian royalty. Victor raised the syringe like a weapon. And that? We're never alone. Elena touched a hidden control on her pendant. Suddenly, the room's screens lit up with security footage, not just from the medical wing, but from throughout the palace. Every angle showed Victor's treachery in perfect detail. Broadcasting live to every screen in the capital, Elena said. Chen is making sure everyone sees the truth. The Parliament, the people, everyone. Victor lunged forward, syringe aimed at the king. But Jack was faster, years of rescue training converting to perfect defensive instinct. He caught Victor's arm, twisted, and drove him to the floor with practiced efficiency. The syringe skittered away as guards burst in. Not Victor's men, but loyal officers led by Karl. They secured Victor as he raged about birthright and destiny. Elena ran to her father's bedside, checking the monitors. We need the real doctors, now! Already here, Your Highness. A medical team rushed in, led by a woman whose competence radiated from every movement. We've been monitoring everything. We can begin countermeasures immediately. 48 hours, Jack said. Will it be enough? The doctor smiled grimly. Now that we know exactly what we're fighting. Yes, His Majesty is strong. He'll survive. Eleanor gripped her father's hand as the medical team began their work. Outside, they could hear Karl announcing Victor's arrest, the coup's failure, the triumph of truth over treachery. You were right, Elena said to Jack, about power being about protection. I had a good teacher, he replied, watching as justice and healing began their work together. Through the window, dawn was breaking over. Moravania, the sky was painted in shades of gold and rose, like flames purifying the air after a long, dark night. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of medical procedures, security sweeps, and diplomatic chaos. Elena remained at her father's bedside as doctors worked to counteract Victor's poison, leaving only when matters of state demanded her attention. Jack stayed close, watching her transform from a fugitive princess into something more, a leader being forged in crisis. The Parliament is demanding answers, Karl reported, entering the medical wing with Chen. Victor's supporters are trying to spin this as a misunderstanding. Then let's make things perfectly clear. Elena stood, smoothing her clothes, proper royal attire now, brought by loyal servants, Prepare the Great Hall. It's time everyone understood exactly what happened here. Jack followed as Elena strode through the palace corridors, guards and officials parting before her. The Great Hall was packed with parliamentarians, journalists and diplomatic observers. Victor's remaining allies watched with barely concealed hostility as Elena took the podium. "People of Mauravania," she began, her young voice carrying unexpected authority. "For centuries, our nation has stood as a beacon of stability in an unstable world. We have survived wars, conspiracies, and countless attempts to destroy us. We survived because we understood something our enemies never did. True power lies not in force, but in trust." She held up the pendant, its damaged surface catching the light. "My Uncle Victor betrayed that trust. He poisoned my father, murdered my brother, and tried to steal not just a throne, but the very soul of our nation." Screens around the hall came to life, showing detailed evidence of Victor's crimes. Chen had done her work well, organizing the data into an undeniable case. But Victor failed to understand what every Mauravanian child learns. Our strength lies not in our walls or our wealth, but in our people. In the firefighter who risked his life to save a stranger. She smiled at Jack. In the police detective who chose justice over protocol. A nod to Chen. In the loyal servants who kept faith when all seemed lost. The hall was silent now, even Victor's supporters unable to deny the weight of evidence and emotion. "My father will recover," Elena continued. "The doctors assure me the poison's effects can be reversed, but Mauravania itself needs healing too. We must rebuild trust, restore faith, and remember who we truly are." A commotion at the back of the hall drew everyone's attention. Queen Maria entered, supporting King Stefan, who, though pale, stood on his own feet. Elena's composure cracked for just a moment at the sight of her parents. "The crown," King Stefan's voice was weak but clear, "has always been more than a symbol of power. It is a promise to protect, to serve, to sacrifice if needed." He looked at his daughter with pride. Elena proved herself worthy of that promise, not through birthright, but through courage and wisdom beyond her years. The king raised a hand, silencing the hall. Victor's crimes will be answered for. Justice will be served. But today, we also celebrate something remarkable. A 12-year-old girl who understood more about leadership than a man who spent his life pursuing power. Elena descended from the podium to embrace her parents. The hall erupted in applause, even former skeptics won over by the sight of the royal family reunited. Jack watched from the sidelines, feeling a familiar ache in his chest. He thought of Sophie, of chances lost and found, of how protecting one child couldn't bring back another, but could still heal something broken inside him. Elena broke from her parents and approached him. "Mr. Stone," she said formally, then dropped the royal facade to hug him fiercely. "Thank you for everything." "Just doing my job, Your Highness." She stepped back, studying him with those two wise eyes. "You know, Mauravania has no official fire marshal. We could use someone with your expertise, someone who understands that sometimes the best way to fight fire is to be braver than the flames." Before Jack could respond, alarms blared through the palace. But these weren't emergency alerts. They were the ancient bells that had marked royal ceremonies for centuries. "Speaking of fire," Elena smiled, "there's one more tradition we need to observe." The king nodded. "The flame of justice. It hasn't been lit since my coronation." "Until today," Elena said, "when we light it for everyone who helped save our kingdom. Starting with a certain firefighter who ran into an inferno to save a princess. Outside, the ancient beacon atop the palace's highest tower waited to be lit, ready to signal to all of Mauravania that truth had triumphed, and justice, like fire, could destroy or purify, depending on the hearts of those who wielded it. Sunset painted the palace towers in shades of gold as the ancient ceremony began. Thousands gathered in the courtyard below, while diplomats and dignitaries lined the balconies. The flame of justice, unlit for decades, waited in its massive bronze brazier. It topped the highest tower. Jack stood beside Elena at the base of the tower steps, both now dressed in ceremonial Moravanian clothes. Chen and Karl flanked them, representing the alliance that had saved the kingdom. In times of darkness, King Stefan's voice carried across the crowd, stronger now after days of proper treatment. Moravania has always sought the light. The flame of justice burns, not just for victory, but for truth. Not just for power, but for wisdom. He turned to Eleanor, who stepped forward with the same grace she'd shown fleeing through fire. Today, we honor those who risked everything to protect our kingdom. First among them, Jack Stone, who proved that true courage knows no borders. Jack moved to kneel, but Elena stopped him with a gentle hand. In Moravania, she said softly, heroes stand tall. Queen Maria presented a medallion, golden flames encircling a crystal core. The Order of the Eternal Flame, she explained, our kingdom's highest honor. Few foreigners have ever received it. As Jack accepted the medallion, he felt its weight, not just in gold, but in meaning. Elena smiled at him, no longer the scared girl from the forest fire, but not quite the remote royal either. There's something else, she said. Show him, father. King Stefan produced an ancient scroll. The position of royal fire marshal has stood vacant for 2 centuries. Perhaps it was waiting for the right person, someone who understands that fire can warm as well as burn, protect as well as destroy. Jack stared at the offering, feeling the weight of choice. He thought of his life in San Francisco, of the fire station that had been his home. But he also thought of Sophie, of chances to protect and serve in new ways. I'd be honored, he said finally. On one condition. Elena raised an eyebrow, royal authority warring with amusement. The crown doesn't usually accept conditions. Make Detective Chen your security advisor, Jack said, and keep Karl as her deputy. You'll need people who aren't afraid to tell you the hard truths. The king laughed, already thinking like a royal advisor. He turned to Chen. What do you say, detective? Ready for a change of scenery? Chen shared a look with Karl, something unspoken passing between them. I suppose someone has to keep you all from getting into trouble. The ceremony proceeded up the tower steps, where the massive brazier waited. Elena carried a torch made of gold and crystal, its design as old as Moravania itself. The flame of justice burns eternally, she recited the ancient words. Not because it cannot be extinguished, but because we choose to keep it lit. Through darkness and storm, through treachery and triumph, we carry the light. She turned to Jack. Will you help me light it? Together they touched the torch to the brazier. Flames roared to life, reaching toward the darkening sky. Below, the crowd erupted in cheers as beacon lights across the kingdom began to answer. A chain of fire carrying the message of justice restored. You know, Eleanor said quietly, watching the flames dance, in the old stories, the fire marshal wasn't just a protector, they were also a teacher. Jack understood her meaning. Planning ahead for the next crisis already. A princess should know how to handle fire, she said, with that familiar calculating look, both literal and political. The flames cast shifting shadows across the tower top as night fell over Moravania. Somewhere in the palace dungeons, Victor awaited trial. His schemes turned to ash. But here, among the fire and friendship, new possibilities were being born. Well then, Your Highness, Jack said, feeling the medallion warm against his chest. Lesson 1. Sometimes the most important fires are the ones we keep burning, not the ones we put out. Eleanor smiled, royal dignity mixing with genuine warmth. I think I'm going to like having a fire marshal again. Below them, Moravania stretched into the gathering darkness, its beacon fires glowing like earthbound stars. The kingdom had survived its trial by fire, emerging stronger for the flames. It had endured. 3 months after Victor's arrest, the palace had settled into new rhythms. Jack stood in his office, the fire marshal's quarters, untouched for 2 centuries until now, reviewing plans for modernizing Mauravania's emergency services. The room's walls were lined with ancient maps and modern screens, bridging past and present just as he did. A knock at the door preceded Elena's entrance. She wore riding clothes, having just come from her morning lessons, but carried herself with increasing, regal confidence. "The Parliament approved your proposal," she announced. "Full funding for the new fire safety infrastructure. They didn't give you any trouble. I simply reminded them how much cheaper prevention is than rebuilding." She grinned, and maybe mentioned that the fire marshal's recommendation carries the full weight of the crown. Jack shook his head, amused. Elena had proven as adept at political maneuvering as she was at emergency protocols, a combination that both worried and impressed the old guard. "How's Chen settling in?" he asked. "Making waves, as usual. She's completely reorganized palace. Security. Carl's helping her integrate local and royal forces." Elena settled into a chair, dropping her formal posture. "They work well together, maybe too well. Playing matchmaker now. I'm 12, not blind." She picked up one of the maps, studying the fire tower locations. "Father's healing well. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. And Victor." Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. "His trial begins next week. The evidence is overwhelming, not just against him, but his entire network. Chen's investigation has uncovered conspirators in 3 other countries. Through the window, they could see the flame of justice still burning atop its tower. Jack had learned it was maintained by a dedicated corps of keepers, each sworn to never let it die. A bit dramatic, perhaps, but he was learning that Mauravanian traditions usually held deeper meaning. "You know," he said carefully, "in firefighting we have a saying. Sometimes the hardest part isn't putting out the blaze, it's preventing the next one." Elena nodded. "You're worried about reprisals, people loyal to Victor waiting for another chance." "Smart girl. That's why we're changing things." She spread out a document she'd brought. Proposals for new transparency laws, anti-corruption measures, democratic reforms. Father agrees. Mauravania can't just survive through secrets anymore. We need to adapt. Jack studied the proposals, impressed. "These are pretty radical changes for a monarchy. The old ways kept us safe," Elena acknowledged. "But they also allowed Victor to hide his poison. Maybe it's time for a different kind of strength." She straightened in her chair. "Besides, I've learned that the best protection isn't walls or secrets. It's having people you trust watching your back." As if to emphasize her point, Chen appeared in the doorway. "Your Highness, the security briefing..." "Coming." Elena stood, then paused. "Oh, and Jack, Mother wanted me to remind you about dinner tonight. She's making that San Francisco soup you mentioned missing." Jack smiled. The Queen had taken to hosting informal family dinners, insisting that the fire marshal's role made him practically family. It was her way of helping him feel less homesick for California, wouldn't miss it. After they left, Jack returned to his work, but his thoughts drifted to how much had changed. The palace staff had started calling him the American Marshal, but with affection rather than dismissal. He'd found himself adopting Mauravanian customs while introducing modern emergency practices. It was a balance, like everything here. His phone buzzed, a text from his old fire captain in San Francisco, updating him on the crew. They'd turned the warehouse fire case into a major investigation, uncovering the arson network that had inadvertently led him to Elena. Justice working in unexpected ways. A different alarm chimed, time for the afternoon training session. Elena had insisted on learning firefighting basics, and other young nobles had followed her lead. Jack gathered his gear, heading to the palace's new training ground. He found his students waiting, Elena at the front as always. They snapped to attention as he approached, future leaders learning to face fire literally and metaphorically. "All right," he said, falling into instructor mode. "Today we're covering rapid response protocols. In an emergency, seconds matter. But you know what matters more? Staying calm under pressure," Elena answered promptly. "Panic spreads faster than flames. Exactly. Jack looked at these young faces, seeing future guardians of their kingdom. Leadership isn't about never facing fires, it's about knowing how to handle them when they come. Elena caught his eye, sharing a knowing look. They'd both learned that lesson the hard way, in a burning forest that felt like a lifetime ago. But from those flames, something remarkable had grown. A partnership of old and new, of tradition and progress, of a princess and a firefighter who'd found purpose in protecting not just lives, but hope itself. 1 year to the day after the forest fire that started everything, Jack stood in Elena's private garden, watching her tend to a special plot of flowers. They were chrysanthemums, the same variety he'd first seen her with in California, now blooming in Moravanian soil. They remind me, Elena said, carefully pruning a stem, that beautiful things can grow from ashes. She'd grown taller over the year, her face losing some of its childhood softness, but her eyes retained that familiar mix of wisdom and mischief. At 13, she was already being called the Fire Princess by her people, a nickname that had nothing to do with her escape from the forest and everything to do with her passionate pursuit of justice. Victor's appeals process ends today, Jack mentioned, helping her with the heavier gardening tools. I know. She sat back on her heels, studying her work. The judges upheld his sentence, life imprisonment with no possibility of pardon. How do you feel about that? Honestly, she brushed dirt from her hands. I feel sorry for him. He spent his whole life pursuing power, never understanding that real strength comes from what you give, not what you take. From their vantage point, they could see the palace grounds where Chen was running a joint training exercise with Carl, royal guards, and local police working together in a way unimaginable a year ago. The changes Elena and her father had implemented were transforming Moravania, opening the ancient kingdom to new possibilities while preserving its core values. The Fire Marshal's Academy opens next month, Elena said, changing subjects. Father says applications have come in from all over Europe. Jack nodded. The academy had been his idea, a way to share modern firefighting techniques while incorporating Moravanian traditions. The first class would include both nobles and commoners, another of Elena's reforms. Speaking of training, he said, your emergency response certification test is tomorrow. I know. She grinned. I've been practicing. Want to see? Before he could answer, she demonstrated a perfect emergency rappel from the garden wall, her security detail trying not to look too nervous as she showed off her skills. Sophie would have loved you, Jack said quietly. Elena landed softly, her expression gentle. Tell me about her. They sat among the chrysanthemums as Jack shared stories of his daughter, her laugh, her dreams, her own garden she'd never got to see bloom. Elena listened with the same attention she gave to matters of state. You know, she said finally, in Moravanian tradition, we believe our loved ones become stars, watching over us. That's why the flame of justice reaches toward the sky. To let them know we remember. Jack looked at this remarkable young woman who'd helped him find purpose again. Your brother would be proud of you. I hope so. She stood, brushing off her clothes. Come on, you're going to be late for the ceremony. The ceremony in question was a surprise Jack had been planning for months. In the palace's main courtyard, dozens of firefighters from San Francisco had gathered, his old crew coming to see the changes their former colleague had helped create. King Stefan, fully recovered and radiating strength, gave a speech about international cooperation and shared values. But the real moment came when Elena stepped forward, presenting each firefighter with a small flame medallion, a new honor, creating bonds between two very different places, united by common purpose. Heroes, Elena proclaimed, aren't defined by their titles or their territories. They're defined by their choices, their sacrifices, and their willingness to run toward danger when others run away. Later, as the visiting firefighters shared stories and techniques with their Moravanian counterparts, Jack found himself back in the garden. The setting sun made the chrysanthemums glow like tiny flames. "Full circle," Eleanor said, joining him. "Fire brought you here, and fire helped build something new." "Not just fire," Jack corrected. "Courage. Yours, mostly." "Ours," she insisted, "and everyone else who chose to stand for what's right." Above them, the flame of justice burned eternal, its light reaching towards stars just beginning to appear. Somewhere up there, Jack liked to think, Sophie was watching, understanding that her father had found a new way to protect and serve. Elena slipped her hand into his, princess and firefighter, standing together in the garden where hope bloomed. From ashes, behind them, two nations' firefighters forged new bonds, while ahead lay a future where ancient wisdom and modern courage worked together to keep the flames of justice burning bright. In the end, they had all learned the deepest truth about fire, that its greatest power lies not in what it destroys, but in what it illuminates, the strength of the human spirit, the bonds of loyalty, and the endless capacity of the heart to rise from the ashes and burn anew.